Linda Eastburn here with Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, and I have Greg Roberts with me once again. The last time we had an interview, we talked about Bigfoot, but we didn't have time to go into some details that he has about the connections between Bigfoot, coyotes, and dogs. So welcome to the show, Greg.
Oh, great to be back, Linda. And yeah, that first one we just we got talking about a lot of things, and we just kind of drifted over the top of what we're going to talk about today. And um, actually, what I was doing, I got to thinking about we've got a lot of indication. I don't know that there's really solid proof, but there is a lot of indication there is a relationship between Bigfoot and coyotes. And it's been noted over many portions of the country. I've heard it here, seen it. But Bigfoot and wolves, bit different category. And we're starting, obviously, to see more and more wolves spread out all over the Western U.S. And they're showing up in a lot of places where Bigfoot is. And that includes here in Southern Oregon. We've got a major wolf pack here, at least one pack that we know of. There's a lot of other wolves running around on the landscape currently in my Bigfoot encounter zone in northeastern Jackson County here in Oregon. We may have as many as 40 wolves in that area. And I've also got my Bigfoot family group that I'm in close contact with. And then there are adjoining Bigfoot family groups. So we know wolves and Bigfoot are out there on the landscape together. We just really don't know if there's any kind of interaction level between them at all. The only recordings I have heard with wolves and Bigfoots vocalizing at the same time all come from Minnesota. And I had reached out to Minnesota Bigfoot Research and Abe and those guys, and I never heard back from them because I was kind of curious. And I just wasn't getting anything happening here with wolves and Bigfoot together. Um,
So what about
so
what about Bigfoot and coyotes, though? I know you've done something with that's
yeah,
something that happened. So is there a connection between the coyotes and Bigfoot?
I absolutely believe that there is. Here in this time of the year, as we start getting into the winter, at least here in our area, Bigfoots do become more predatory on deer and elk. When they kill a deer and an elk, they go after very specific protein rich portions of those animals. They leave a lot out there. And coyotes, of course, take full advantage of that. So there is that kind of lion jackal relationship that we see clearly in Africa, where packs of jackals will follow prides of lions around, and then, of course, feast on whatever's left after the lions are done with the kill. I'm pretty sure the same thing is happening with coyotes and Bigfoot. The other thing that may also be happening is a literal sense of coyotes being watchdogs for Bigfoot.
I
Um,
see. Yeah.
and that both of those things actually make a lot of sense to me, because whether humans realize it or not, as soon as we enter the woods, there's a variety of things sounding the alert to everything else, letting everything know humans are in the woods. And our squirrels out here, for example, they have different alarm calls based on what kind of predator or threat they're seeing. They have one alarm call if it's something in the air, they have another alarm call if it's something on the ground, and they have a specific alarm call that they do when it's a human.
Exactly. Now, and I know your background put you in the forest and a lot of knowledge. Can you give our audience an idea of what your background is again?
Okay. Um, grew up in a family that, Native American by ancestry on dad's side. So my dad, my uncles, they had me out in the woods from the time I could walk behind them. And so some of my earliest memories in my life are going along through the woods behind my dad and my uncles. My uncle Ted, who has since passed away, was superior level woodsman in his knowledge of basically everything going on around us. He actually had developed a relationship with ravens because he found a raven chick lying on the forest floor. He brought it home, turned it into a pet. He taught it how to speak English. It taught him raven speak. So he could understand what the ravens were talking about. Um, then over the course of my life, that just progressed into me being in the outdoors constantly. I wound up being a wildland firefighter. I wound up working in the ski industry for about a decade, and just spent as much time out in the woods as I could. And a lot of that was just sitting and observing and listening. The funny part was I grew up here where Bigfoot stories abound, and I didn't believe I'd ever had an encounter until 2007. And then I found out I actually did have an encounter in August of 1984, but it was the realization in 2007 of what I had heard with a buddy when we were on an elk scouting trip in the Sky Lakes wilderness here in Southern Oregon. The realization of what I had heard turned me into a Bigfoot knower. There are believers who believe they exist without having had any kind of interaction with them. Then there are knowers who absolutely know they exist because of direct interaction with them. And I'm definitely in that knower category.
Exactly. And you have a dog, and this dog has some special relationship or something that the dog has taught you about Bigfoot. What is that story?
Oh, okay. Well, actually, what happened here was last year. I do DMC duties and do talks about Bigfoot and wolves at a series of outdoors and sportsman shows that we have here in Oregon and also down in Northern California. And a guy reached out to me who had been following me for a while, both on my main business page, rogueweather.com on Facebook, and also on my Bigfoot blog page, Southern Oregon Bigfoot Seeker. And he said, "Hey, I've got a hybrid wolf and I'd like to bring him over for your talk that you're doing in Medford." And, normally when people tell me that, I'm kind of, yeah, okay, let's see what this actually is. Um, so when we're doing the Medford show, Mark showed up and he brought his wolf hybrid, and its name was Appa. And as soon as he got in front of me, this was definitely the highest percentage wolf dog I had seen that wasn't a 100% wolf. It had the body mass of a wolf. It had the coloring of a wolf. The only way I knew it had any dog to it and that it was a hybrid was the legs were a little short and the ears were doggy shaped. But in any other way, I looked at that and went, that's a wolf. Oh, wow. And it's a beautiful animal, weighed 165 pounds. And so, of course, yes, I used him at the talk I did about wolves here in Medford. And Mark and I continued to develop our relationship. And, we got together several times with Appa and loved it every time. I mean, he, for as high a percentage as he is, he's 78% Northern Timber Wolf, 22% Malamute, and German Shepherd. He is by far the most docile, high percentage wolf dog I've ever seen. You can take him into public settings and he's as mellow as he can be. He is a ladies' man. He loves women and girls. He just interacts with them so well and so strongly. I was completely blown away, but I also kind of started taking notes and going, that's probably as close to a wolf as I'm going to be able to be around. And then I started thinking about Bigfoot and wolves, Bigfoot and wolves. I'm like, I wonder if. And so I got together with Mark. We had a meeting over in Grants Pass in August. And I said, how would it be if you guys came out with me and we did a Bigfoot outing and brought Appa, because I want to see how he's going to interact to the presence of them. And we may even get true wild wolves to show up. And Mark was all for it. And so we got together down towards the end of August, and it was Mark, his brother Chris, and Appa, and they were following me in a van. And then I led the way to the spot I wanted to get to. And for all the years of research, going out that I've been doing and having seen them, I had never had a road involved sighting of a Bigfoot ever, either along the road or crossing the road or anything like that. And we're driving up there that night, and I came around this one bend in the road, and on the left-hand side of the road, all of a sudden, here's a shadow where a shadow shouldn't be. And I'm looking at that, and I'm going, that's weird. What in the world? And all of a sudden, there was a movement, and the next thing I know, I got these two big yellow eyes looking right down at me. And I was like, oh, and slammed on the brakes. And that thing in one fluid move was off the road and gone. And I was like, wow. That didn't look anything at all like I thought I would see a Bigfoot standing beside the road would look like. It just like this big black shape. Like I said, it seemed like a displaced shadow where a shadow shouldn't be, looked at me, and then it was gone. So slammed on the brakes, stopped. Then I start moving up slow again, and I'm looking where that thing was at. And of course, the dirt along the road was rock hard. There was no tracks, no nothing there. So we go up the road a little bit, and there's this wide section at the side of the road. I pulled over into it. Mark pulls in behind me, and I'm telling him what happened. And he said, when you slammed on the brakes, Appa came out of the back of the van, and he was trying to go out the driver's side window, and he was looking downhill and acting like he was hearing and tracking something. And I was like, yeah, I said I couldn't believe it. First I thought maybe I imagined it. And then I'm telling Mark all of this, and then Chris is saying from the van, Appa wants out. Mark said put him on his lead because he has a good stout lead they put him on. As soon as Chris and Appa got out of the van, he went right around our vehicles, got over at the edge of that little whiteout pull-out area, and he's looking down into the forest in the direction that thing went. And now I'm convinced he could still hear it moving down there. So we get him loaded back up in the van, and then they followed me on up to where we were actually going to set up for that night. We got there, we got everything set up, and 20 minutes later, that's when the real fun started. All of a sudden, Appa goes on full alert, and he's staring to the southwest of us intently down in the trees. And Mark and I are watching him going, he's hearing something right now. And I'm like, yeah, he's on full alert. He's very aware of something being there. We didn't know for sure what. So we sit there and we just keep listening, and then we can hear heavy bipedal footsteps approaching us. Mark's got thermal equipment. He's looking down. There is so much heat radiating off the trees and the rocks, he can't pick up anything. But I'm using night vision scope, and I look down there and I'm peering through the trees, and all of a sudden I look, and there's two big eyes staring at me, blinking. I can see the eye blinks, and then it turns and it's gone. And Appa tracked that thing. You could see him move in response to that thing moving. He kept moving his head first, then his body, tracking it as it was moving. And I look at Mark and I go, they're right here. And Mark said, yeah, I heard those footsteps coming up. And so from that point on, they were approaching us, circling us, coming around us, and Appa kept turning. He kept looking. There were times he'd just go into frozen immobility, and I was certain he was seeing them. I had no doubt. He saw them where we didn't. He could hear them, even if we couldn't, and he absolutely was smelling them, because that animal stayed full rigid attention at all times, constantly tracking something going on around us. And then we'd been in there about 2 hours and the wind started coming up and they started approaching closer. And we could tell that by the way Appa was looking. And we have this little hill right directly above us. They started moving into position on that hill, flanking us. And Appa kept staring up that hill, and his head's just doing this almost like a metronome. And Mark said, "There's more than one." And I said, "Yeah, there's multiples." And all of a sudden, Appa's pressing between Mark and Chris, and he's like, and he starts withdrawing. When that didn't work, he jumped up, he got in the back of the van, and he cowered in the back of the van. And I look at Mark and Chris, and they're like, he's never done this before. We've been right on top of bears. He knows about cougars. Heck, he's had a fight with a cougar, and he didn't act like this with cougars being around. We've never seen this before. He went in the back of that van and just cowered in there. And I said, okay, that's it. I've seen everything I wanted to know. Let's get him out of here, because I didn't want to traumatize him. I truly didn't want to do that. I just wanted to see how he might react to the presence of a Bigfoot or wolves, and also how would a Bigfoot react to him. Well, got my answers, and to prove the level of trauma, Mark's cleaning out the van the next day. Doors are open. He's washing it, getting everything out of there. Normally, if he opens up any of the doors on his van, Appa makes a beeline and gets in there. He said Appa laid across the yard and wouldn't get anywhere near the van. In fact, it took him a week before he would get into the van. So we kind of learned something out of that experience about, an animal that's basically lived its whole life being among people. And yet the second you dropped him back into the wild element, the wolf side and everything else about it kicked in. And for what I think was happening, I think the Bigfoots, they knew who I was. They've had enough exposure to me, but it was the presence of Appa with us that they couldn't figure out, because I know they had never seen a wolf, or what they thought was a wolf, with humans before. And it made them insanely curious. They were coming to look at this and try and figure out, what's a wolf doing with these humans? That they couldn't figure out.
Heard a lot of stories about dogs doing a very similar type of thing, where they cower away. They're and are very traumatized sometimes with the onset of Bigfoot encounters, such as that. So the Bigfoot were coming in, they were getting closer and closer into you. Now, how is that different? Let's say if you had not had the wolf with you, what would the Bigfoot behavior have been otherwise?
Well, quite honestly, I mean, if it's just me out there by myself, I'll give you a perfect example. About 3 weeks later, I was in the exact same spot with Bart Catino, and Bart and I had gone to a couple other different spots before we got there. We found a new tree bend that they had done for me, by the way, on a place I call Bigfoot Hill, where they leave tree markers. There's a road that comes in that I use a lot when I'm deer hunting up there. And there are tree bends and breaks they've left for me. And all the bends and breaks point right into the road. Like they're saying, yeah, Greg, we know this is your road. And so I was showing Bart that. We got over to the same spot eventually where I took Appa. We'd been in there maybe a half an hour. And I was talking with Bart. Bart's talking to me. And all of a sudden, downhill from us, I hear, whoop. And Bart's talking. He missed it. And I go, well, I said, Bart, we just got whooped at. He goes, we did? And I go, yeah. And I go, hang on. And I replied, I went, whoop, back. That was it. Nothing else happened the rest of the night while we were up there, because it's just me there. They're used to me being there, but they are going to say hello to me to let me know they know I'm there. And sometimes it's wood knocks. Sometimes it's that whoop. Sometimes it's whoop, whoop, whoop. We'll get that too. But that's a far more frequent type of encounter. Or I'm sitting there in the dark, I'm pretending like I'm having a conversation, and I'll catch them moving around, hear them moving around, or I'll see eye shine as they're looking at me and checking me out. Most of the time, they just kind of move on doing what they're doing. They don't particularly stop and stare at me because, well, they know who I am. The Appa experience, though, was totally different and totally off the chart. That was something new. I honestly don't think I had surprised them by doing something they hadn't seen since the very first encounter night that we talked about in the last one, where I literally went walking down the side of a mountain on this road in the middle of the night, bright full moonlight without a flashlight. They'd never seen a human do that. That made them insanely curious about who I was, and they kind of tested me a little bit, but that also established the relationship between us. And then doing the Appa thing, that definitely was something they'd never seen before, and they were doing their best to figure that out.
For sure. Going back to the night that you took Appa with you out there and you saw the Bigfoot in the road, do you think that they knew at that time that you were on your way and that Appa was with you?
I would say it's probably more likely they knew it was me on the way. I think Appa was something that they may not have picked up on, honestly, until we had stopped and I was talking to Mark, and then Mark's brother Chris got Appa out of the van. And I think at that point, they may have become aware of Appa because it wasn't that far from where we had that conversation and Appa was listening to something down in the trees to where we went and set up for the night. Not that far, and especially not that far for them. And I think they probably picked up on Appa being there at that point, and then it was game on. They definitely trailed us over there because they knew he was there. And when they knew we were stopping and staying, they all came in to get a better look.
For sure. Now, Appa never did bark or growl or anything like that. Just a visual and hearing observation that you saw in his behavior.
Yeah, no barking, no growling, no hair raised that we saw. The only real physical thing that we saw out of him that indicated anything was right at the very end. He did tuck his tail in, and his tail was tucked when he's getting between Mark and Chris. Like, I'm going to get between Daddy and Uncle and try and have them as a buffer. And then as the Bigfoots kept getting closer to us, then eventually it was, I'm getting in the van and I'm going to try and pretend they're not even here.
What do you think causes, what do you think it is about Bigfoot that they sense that's different than any other type of a predator creature out there in the woods that makes them cower away from Bigfoot?
Um, you know, I'm trying to think of the it's the projection of the power and something being bigger, and animals just intrinsically recognize it when something is much more bigger and powerful, and they know I haven't got a chance against something like that. It's that innate primal instinct to realize you're dealing with something that you wouldn't be able to handle.
Yeah, I took my little 7 or 12 pound dog for some obedience training, and there was a German Shepherd in there. And that little dog was like just barking his head off and would have just attacked the
Yep.
big German Shepherd. But so the correlation in size was unbelievable. And the German Shepherd, of course, could have just torn my little dog apart. So that's why I was wondering, the essence of power. I wonder how they sense that essence of bigness and power that's so phenomenally dangerous to them.
Yeah, that would have to be something you would know firsthand by being a wolf, by being anything out on the landscape when it acknowledges, oh, you definitely are more than I could handle. Um, you know, it's so hard for humans to really grasp and understand. what goes on out there in nature because, well, we're humans. And a lot of humans, actually, we have what I call the God human characteristic. And if you put a firearm with the God human characteristic, it gets even worse. And most wildlife tends to want to avoid us because we're smelly, we're obnoxious to begin with, and humans mean guns and humans mean danger. And by and large, wildlife is going to avoid you until and unless they actually get to know you and establish a relationship. And if they realize you're not a threat, that changes things. And as humans, we can start to get better glimpses into the world from their viewpoint if you're patient enough to just sit, be still, and observe. Don't try to do anything, just watch. My Uncle Ted, that was probably one of the most valuable lessons I learned from him. Sometimes the best thing you can do is nothing, just sit and watch. The amazing part about wolves is we get to know them, really get to know them. They are incredible at just sitting and watching and learning. We have huge problems right now here in Jackson County with wolf depredations on livestock. Where that begins is we have ranchers out there to this day that still believe, well, if something dies, just leave it there and nature will take care of it. Well, nature will. And when you have wolves present, wolves will show up to, quote, take care of it. They feed on the dead and the remains of the dead first. But while they're there, they literally watch the living livestock and they're taking notes. And every single ranch in Oregon right now that is having issues with wolf depredations, it started because the wolves came because there was something dead that attracted them first. Everybody knows wolves are alpha predators without any question. They may be super alpha scavengers. They actually scavenge more than they kill. And this isn't my belief, it's a fact. And we wouldn't have known this had we not been dropping satellite tracking collars on the wolves and then being able to watch and see exactly what they're doing. And when they're in the process of feeding, they start moving and behaving in a certain pattern. The satellite picks up on that on the collar they have on. Biologists go out and go, oh, lo and behold, they're feeding on this. What were they feeding on? Did it die naturally or did the wolves kill it? The majority of the time, it died naturally. The wolves showed up for the free and easy meal.
Have you ever taken any other dogs out with you at all? Any other just regular
No,
dogs?
because I didn't need to, because part of that goes back to Bobo on Finding Bigfoot and his dog Monkey. They showed Monkey out on their expeditions quite a bit. I heard firsthand from both Cliff and Bobo how Monkey reacts out there. Monkey is also not your typical dog encountering a Bigfoot. She will whine. She occasionally will let out a low growl. Well, actually, she's passed now, so rip Monkey. But she never barked. She never went hysterical. She didn't do a lot of things dogs do. We have more than enough reports of people, their dogs in the woods, just suddenly barking and losing their minds and becoming fearful, looking out in the darkness, and the humans see nothing, but the dogs do. Or the dogs go tearing off into the woods and they're acting all big and brave, and then all of a sudden they come running back. They're in terror. They try and get to their humans. They try and get into tents, campers, whatever. And then the humans report some level of Bigfoot activity. So no, just taking a true dog out there, I didn't ever really feel the need. But Appa, being as much wolf as he is, looking like a wolf, yeah, that was a different thing altogether. And no, he never reacted like a dog. He reacted like a wolf. And that was actually that was really cool to watch and see happen firsthand right in front of me, because he reacts like wolves do when they're seeing a threat either to them or to the den and the pups. He was on full rigid attention, just staring intently into the dark, and I could see his nose working. And there were times when he was just, I know dogs, I know their behavior, I know wolves, I know their behavior. He was locked in on, and I know he was looking at him. He could see him.
Wow. So being out in the woods as often as you are and knowing when Bigfoot is around or present and perhaps not around or present, have you noticed any change in behavior of other animals, natural animals to the habitat? Does their behavior change when Bigfoot's a little closer into your
Yeah, and I really became aware of that again this year, because with as many trips as I was making doing outings, because I also am now doing outings where people can join me. You pay a nominal fee. You basically are just covering my gas in my vehicle. Um, but I'm taking people out there. So we had a lot of time out in the woods, and I don't, especially in the encounter zone, and I don't know if I remembered it before, but this year I became very aware of one thing. If we were seeing deer, we were not having encounters with the Bigfoot in any way. If we weren't seeing deer, that's when we were having everything happen. And especially that night when we took Appa out there, we actually didn't see a single deer on the way in. And when I say on the way in, the road to get to the spot where we had all of this happen with Appa is approximately 9 miles long. And there'll be nights that I'm driving in there that there's deer and elk sometimes too, bouncing back and forth across the road all over. Um, you may see 20, 30 deer just driving in on that road. And when we're having Bigfoot activity, pardon, nothing. And that night with Appa, no deer at all. The only thing we saw driving in and out were cattle out there on summer range, and they actually were bedding down on the road because the road holds a lot of heat and it feels real good to lay on. I've seen deer and elk do the same thing. They'll bed down on the roads because of the radiant heat coming off the roadbed.
Well, I know that Doug Hytek has done quite a bit of research involving the coyotes and Bigfoot. What do you know about that?
Um, the only thing I can add, because obviously, yeah, Doug's done a lot. The only thing I can add here is coyotes are in close proximity to Bigfoot, very close. They will vocalize back and forth to each other. There's a thing that I call the dawn chorus, that right as daylight is breaking to the point that you can really start to begin to see things, it's very frequent to hear Bigfoot start vocalizing and coyotes vocalizing. And I don't know who's responding to who, or if they're really responding, or if they're all just doing a group sing along. Um, but that happens. My very first encounter with a Bigfoot, which was a vocalization, hearing those big, long, drawn out howls, the coyotes, every coyote in the area was responding to that. You listen to the Columbiana County, Ohio howl that Matt Moneymaker recorded in '94. By the way, 10 years after what I heard at Sky Lakes, canines are responding to that Bigfoot howl in exactly the same way that we had the coyotes responding out here, which is part of the reason why I know it wasn't a hoax and that I'm a knower. I was a knower before I ever really had direct personal encounters where I'm seeing them, hearing them, that kind of thing, because of that relationship between coyotes and Bigfoot. That actually, for me, was established right on the very first encounter I had.
What about birds? Any behavior among birds that are different in Bigfoot areas?
Um, yeah, here's the funny part. When they're around, and I'm not going to say it happens all the time, but I have definitely noted multiple times that bird activity there's almost none. That day leading into the night when we heard those Bigfoot vocalizations, there was no bird activity. I mean, we didn't even see birds flying. There were no bird sounds whatsoever. And I could say the same thing was true about squirrels. Squirrels are noisy little critters, and they normally are making continuous level of noise to some level, whether they're having territory disputes, whether they're sounding off about this predator or that predator, or they're mad that jays are robbing their food stashes. Something is always making a squirrel sound off, and they get dead quiet when they're around. And part of the reason is squirrels are a handy snack for Bigfoot pretty much any time of the year. And so squirrels know that a Bigfoot will go after them, and so they go silent. Now, the one type of bird that absolutely is not silent with Bigfoot around, and we've heard it frequently, owls. And in fact, Bigfoot will mimic owl calls, especially barred owls. That's a real easy call for them to mimic. It's an easy call for us to mimic. And Bigfoot will also imitate the screech screams of the spotted owl, because for them, that's a really easy thing to do. That is much tougher for a human to pull off. In fact, I've never heard a human accurately pull off the screech scream of spotted owls. Now, we have fewer spotted owls out here thanks to the barred owls, but yeah, owls definitely remain very active even if they're around. And like I said, Bigfoot will mimic them.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think owls do not seem to go silent and the others do?
Just simply, I think it's, you get these creatures of the night, and owls also fly silently. And there's a different thing about owls in general. They are a very special, unique bird, and that extends even right here into this, what we're talking about. There's a different dynamic in owls, and it's kind of difficult to explain. It also kind of leads to the mythology about owls. I think humans from the millennia have recognized that about owls, and um, I wouldn't even begin to really fully understand what the dynamic between owls and Bigfoot is, but I know owls certainly don't feel any sort of a threat around Bigfoot. And most of the time when you're out and you're looking to have an encounter with Bigfoot, if you're hearing owls going off, that's actually a very good thing. That was a pretty good sign for me that owls were going off. And then sadly, on the west side of my encounter zone, the government showed up. They did a test program to remove barred owls to see if it would help spotted owls. Obviously, the test program said yes, because now they have literally budgeted 1.5 billion with a B dollars to kill 500,000 barred owls here in the western U.S. And they're going to do that. And the irony is, it's not going to save the spotted owls, because on the one hand, they're going to kill the barred owls. On the other hand, they persist in letting hundreds of thousands, if not millions of acres of prime spotted owl habitat burn every year. So we're losing prime spotted owl habitat every year because the government lets it burn. Then the presence of the barred owl. The spotted owl's just been selected naturally for extinction, one way or the other. And on the one hand, by allowing the fires to burn and destroy, we're promoting that. And on the other hand, we're interfering by killing barred owls who haven't done anything wrong other than being barred owls. Now, they went and killed owls on the west side of my encounter zone, and it's created an owl dead zone. When I first found that, I could go in there, and on nights when the owls were active, I could distinctly hear 6 different species of owls sounding off: great gray, great horned, barred, spots, barn owls. Then you got the smaller owls. Actually, it was more than, because then you've got the little smaller owls that make the little whistles and chirp kind of sounds. And that included northern pygmies, saw-wheat, you know, the smaller variety of owls. When they went in and killed barred owls there, owl dead zone. I go in there now, I don't hear owls at all, period. The owls realized what was going on. It's an owl dead zone. Haven't heard one, haven't seen one in there in probably at least 8 years.
That's amazing. So, do you think humans are to Bigfoot is to other animals?
No. And I'll put it this way. And pardon for that. Part of why the government wants to keep Bigfoot a myth officially is because they know, maybe even better than I know, what I have seen with my own observation. These things are not forest apes. Absolutely not. And they're also not primitive human. They're something else. And I think the government has a far better clue and handle on the something else that they are. I honestly believe that a Bigfoot is going to regard a human as a noisy nuisance they want to avoid under most circumstances. When you break through their wall of defense and they get to know you and they will trust you, changes the game. I'm lucky enough to be able to say I've been able to change the game. Most people are going to have the encounters that they have purely by dumb luck, or they push the boundary so much that you get the immediate angry response and being told in no uncertain terms, no, we don't like you, we don't want you here, get out. And there is a family group directly to the north of mine that they are perpetually in that grumpy, angry attitude towards any human. And any human they encounter, they just treat it as immediate threat. Get out. We don't want you here. And that, I think that may have been the byproduct of a lot of negative experience with human. My family group, I've said it before, I'll say it again. They seem to have the temperament of happy-go-lucky, loving hippies, for lack of a better way. I have had a lot of people report encounters with my family group, and not a single one of them was hostile, really hostile in any way. Not one.
I interviewed someone yesterday that talked about Bigfoot potentially having some kind of healing properties or some kind of something special. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard of any of that? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, because Dr. Matt Johnson, the famous guy at Oregon Caves and the very well-known sighting about what happened there, Dr. Matt talked about taking somebody out in the field with him that I can't remember what condition they had, but they had multiple close encounters with Matt's family group that he was in relationship with in Josephine County. And that person, mysteriously, their issues disappeared after a 4-day weekend with Matt out there in close contact with Matt's family group.
Yeah, I've heard of that from several people, and that's kind of amazing. What would you attribute that to?
To be perfectly honest, I would have no way to rationally explain that to anybody, because honestly, our family, mom's side, a ton of doctors, a ton of medical professionals, a ton of, quote unquote, science-based medicine that just wouldn't accept that. On dad's side, the native side, there is a lot of spirit belief. The cleansing ceremonies, this thing you see on TV and movies about burning sage and using herbs, and there's a whole different way of approaching it in the traditional native sense. There's definitely some validity to it. There are things that happen all the time that just rationally, from a human viewpoint, can't be explained. I forget his name. I want to say it's Dr. Mark Siegel, who's on Fox News all the time. He is a doctor. He's actually, when you look at his medical background, it's really impressive. He has written a book now talking about people who were cured of things when our quote standard medical would have totally written them off. And he's referring to it as miracles. Miracles still happen to this day. Okay. So if that's true, and Matt is telling this story about this person whose condition disappeared after a 4-day weekend in contact with Bigfoot, there could be some validity. The closest thing I've ever really heard outside of that, I have read 3 different accounts where humans were out hiking. They fell, they got injured severely, broken bones, busted up, concussions, wandering around in a daze. They talk about waking up on the ground and looking up, and there's Bigfoots looking at them. And at least in 2 of those instances, they said the last thing they remember was the Bigfoots looking at them. The next thing they know, they're at their car miles away from where the Bigfoot was looking for them, and then saying, the doctors are saying it was no physical way I walked out of the woods. So Bigfoots carried them out, took them to their vehicle. That's your only possible explanation.
I've heard of similar stories as that as well. I also heard a story the other day about during the COVID situation that Bigfoot was bringing them. This was a clan of Bigfoot on their property. They were bringing them herbal remedies that work specifically for respiratory issues. And it just kind of an unusual coincidence maybe, but they really felt like they understood what was going on and they just brought them what they needed.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. Those cohabitation situations have produced some pretty interesting stories coming out just like that. There are things out there on the landscape that definitely have medicinal purposes. Willow, for example, if you're having any kind of physical pain, where willow was present for the First Nations people, they utilized willow as a pain reliever. We have observed wildlife of various kinds going and chewing on willows, especially if they were doing something noticeable like limping. So very clearly, willow has some medicinal properties. Other things have medicinal properties. Some of the mushrooms that grow out there, I don't think the wildlife is eating it just purely as a food consumption source. I believe there are definitely some varieties of mushrooms that probably provide medicinal benefit to wildlife and obviously would to Bigfoot. Psilocybin mushrooms, it used to be the hippie thing. The more we're dealing into it now, or getting into it now, finding out psilocybin mushrooms actually have beneficial properties in all kinds of ways to help people, among other things, with PTSD, with chronic pain. So I have a friend of mine now. He literally walked away from his insurance business because he is now state approved, federal approved. He's growing psilocybin mushrooms for medical purposes.
Well, I think that's fantastic. I'm one person that really enjoys natural remedies and use a lot of
Yep.
herbal supplements. So I think that's a wonderful thing. Is there anything else you want to share with us, Greg, before we end our interview today?
It just, again, I can't stress enough that don't ever close your mind off and use the human viewpoint of that's ridiculous. That can't possibly happen because, well, it possibly could. When you're in the woods, sit, be patient, watch, and observe. Don't do anything more than that. Just find a great spot in the woods, sit down, and just watch and listen to everything that's going on around you. Take notes, literal notes if you need to, but definitely take the mental notes. Start becoming really aware of what's happening around you. And heck, I have days I'll be sitting out there and then the sun hits and I'm sitting on this nice big cozy duff pile and I'll just nod off and take a nap for a while and then wake up and start going back to what I was doing and spend the full day. And I typically do that mostly when I'm out on scouting trips, wanting to see what deer and elk are doing. I don't typically go out in the day anymore when I'm doing my Bigfoot stuff because they're just flat more active at night. They are. They can be active in the day without any question, but it's a far more typical thing for them to be active at night. And they're absolutely going to be more willing to approach you in the darkness.
Well, Greg, fascinating interview. Once again, just love listening to all of your wonderful insight and stories and your experiences in nature. Lots of rich material. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah. And the only other thing, again, I was just blessed to be, raised, especially on dad's side, by people who held to the tradition and the way First Nations peoples have always believed. We are a part of the earth. We are meant to be connected to it. And the worst thing a lot of people have done is totally disconnect from the world they should have been part of. And my family ingrained that in me and made me realize how important that is. And I'm blessed as a result to be able to experience a lot of things a lot of other people never have.
Absolutely. And we appreciate you sharing all of that with us. So thank you for coming on the show.
You bet. Pleasure to be back. And I'm happy you were like, we got to get you back on to talk about that thing that happened when you guys took Appa out. Because that, Doug has even said it. He goes, I've never heard anybody doing anything like that before.
Yeah, that was a pretty amazing story. And I'm glad that Appa's fine and got over the fear of all of that and back in safe grounds too.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, we just saw him recently. I finally got him together with my daughter and she absolutely loves him and he loves her. And yeah, he's still same old Appa.
That's great. So thank you so much. And thank the audience for watching today. If you like this show and this channel, please like, share, and subscribe.